Good evening, Reds, and welcome to Born on Reds Monday Money in the Bank special. I'm joined today by Mo Chatra, a finance expert who hopefully is going to give us some sort of lowdown in regards to Liverpool and Liverpool's finances following the Deloitte report that was published last week. First and foremost, Mo, how are you, man? How's things?
Yeah, good. Been up since 4 a.m. today. So, as we record this, it's been a long one, but, it's all part of the grind.
I can imagine. By the way, guys, if you guys are wondering why we've gone with the Money in the Bank sort of theme, Mo's a diehard WWE fan, so we went with the sort of WWE theme. No pile drivers today, Mo, and hopefully by the end of play, hopefully Liverpool fans won't be rock bottom. So
Very good.
Mo,
Maybe a tombstone here or there, though.
from our side, Mo, it was really important to get you on, especially more so with the report that was published last week. And I look, loads of what happens on Twitter. People went a bit crazy. So many things were said in regards to the report, in regards to the money situation. So who better for us guys to get you on board? And yeah, look, I think this is going to be a long one, meaning there's a lot of questions. So many people have sent me so many questions that I'm going to obviously put to yourself. And especially novices like us, we don't have a clue in terms of the finance side of football. So hopefully, and I know you're really good with trying to explain it to people like us. So I think it'll be good to have your thoughts more. More, I think we'll make a start then. And I think, first and foremost, I think it's important that we actually understand what the actual key facts are in regards to the actual Deloitte report that was published. And if you can sort of explain to us, what the actual Money League is and what it entails.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I'll start with what the Money League is. So there's a very large accountancy firm called Deloitte, publishes the Football Money League every year, and we've done so for the last 26 years. And what they do every year is rank the biggest 20 clubs in world football based on revenue. And they class revenue as one of three income streams. Broadcast revenue, so income from things like the Champions League, from domestic competitions like the Premier League, for example. That's the first one. Second one is commercial revenue, which is self-explanatory. And the third one is matchday revenue. And the highlight from this latest report that was published Thursday last week is that Liverpool Football Club finished third in that Football Money League. So of all the clubs in world football, Liverpool finished above every single club in the world, bar two. The only two that finished above Liverpool were Real Madrid and Manchester City. And Liverpool's turnover was £594 million, and that was second only to Real Madrid, 604. So Real were only 10 million above us. And then on top was Manchester City at 619 million, with a very big chunk of that made up of commercial revenue. There you go. So those are the figures in euros. 731 million euros for Manchester City, which equates to 619 million pounds. Liverpool at 701.7 million euros, which is 594 million. Real Madrid in number two. And interestingly, for the first time in Deloitte Money League history, Liverpool finished above Manchester United. So our biggest rivals finished behind us for the first time. And that would be the first time in about 31 years that Liverpool Football Club generated more money than Manchester United. So it really shows the shift in momentum. And one of the other kind of key points to note is that the Football Money League also gave information about the wage bill. And what it demonstrated is that Liverpool's wage bill was 62% of turnover, which equates to a whopping £368 million.
Look, Mo, I think that we're looking at obviously people's reactions online. I think the wage bill was a question that was being asked around in terms of how is our wage bill so high, and if especially if you compare them with lesser sort of clubs, and the difference really, and how is that actually possible?
Yeah, I mean, the wage bill, obviously, as you say, created a massive amount of debate. It's been raging and raging since the figures first were published last week. Look, with the Liverpool wage bill, within the Deloitte Money League, it was the fifth highest in world football. So the only four clubs whose wage bill was bigger than Liverpool's was Manchester City. Sorry, not Manchester City, in fact. Sorry, it was Real Madrid, Manchester United, um, Barcelona, and PSG. PSG's wage bill was 111% of their revenue, which meant that their wage bill was bigger than the total amount of income that they brought in, which is amazing. And obviously, we know a large part of the reason why they signed Mr. Messi, and he doesn't come cheap. So, that alone whacks on a huge amount of money onto your wage bill. And on top of that, they've got other people that earn a little bit above minimum wage, your Mbappe's, your Neymar's, etc., etc. But yeah, Liverpool's wage bill was fifth highest in world football. Manchester City, their wage bill was less, surprisingly. Look,
Like raise some sort of eyebrows more.
the people's eyebrow is raised, definitely. Look, my lawyers have helped me with this answer.
Okay.
It has been alleged in the past that not all of Manchester City's wages are declared through the club. I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm just saying that that is what's been alleged in the past. So take that for what you will. But at the same time, Liverpool's wage bill is very, very significant now. And with Liverpool's model, the more money you spend on wages, it means the less money you then have to spend on other things.
Looking at that, actually, you mentioned the wages and stuff. It's sort of staggering. 63%, especially when we start thinking about only probably more Salah's on some sort of like 300 plus in terms of wages, and then to have 63% of it go towards the players. Even from my side, I just feel it seems a bit high, considering look, Mo Salah's the only player that's on over 300k.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's created a lot of discussion. So what I am planning on doing in the coming weeks is trying as best as I can, based on conversations I have with people around in and around football, as well as what I can piece together from accounts, is try and provide a bit of a breakdown of the wage bill. But in terms of the basic wages that we see reports of, so whether it's player A earning 80,000 a week or player B earning 200,000 a week, I think my estimation is likely to come in that if you add all of those figures up for the first team squad, the wage bill based on just those figures will probably come in at around 150 million. So then the question is, okay, if that's 150 million, how on earth is a total wage bill 368? So there are some factors here. The wage bill that is published is not for the players only. It's for all of the employees of the whole club. So that also includes people that work on a match day. So on a match day now, and this is casual employees, there can be up to 2,000 people working on a match day, in and around the ground, working behind the bar, serving food, all these things. So it's a big, big operation. Obviously, they're all paid relatively modest amounts of money on a match day. So clearly, they won't make up a significant chunk of that wage bill. But then you have coaches, who obviously considerably more, and most notably the manager himself, Jurgen Klopp. And then you have your academy players, and you have all the people that work behind the scenes, in IT, looking after Anfield, looking after the grounds, working in finance, in HR. It's a big operation now. There's close to 1,000 employees. But my estimation is that all of those people all told, the total cost might be in the region of 50 to 60 million. So if you add that on top of the 150 million approximately for basic wages for players, you're then up to 200 million. In the accounts, there is also a breakdown of other costs, which are labelled social security costs and pension costs. And in the latest accounts, they're probably going to be in the region of about 45, 50 million. So then we're up to about 250 million, but we're still way off the 368.
Yeah.
So what's the difference? The key difference is bonuses. But is it 118 million's worth of difference? So that is the question. And, you know, some fans on Twitter, as they do, will allege that, well, it's FSG kind of hiding income that ultimately is going to their pockets and putting it through the wage bill. I could sit here in front of you now and say, I can't say one way or another because I'm not privy to the accounts. Is that the sort of thing that goes on in business? It does. But I'm not saying that that's what FSG are doing, but I can't prove one way or another whether that is the case or not. So I just need to be clear about that. But ultimately, if you were to ask the club, they'll say, look, it is largely because of the bonuses. And it is something that has been talked about a lot, that Liverpool's wage structure is the most heavily incentivized in the Premier League, that we pay significantly more in bonuses. And the reason for that, the reason we put that into place is because we want to reward players based on performance. So the more goals we score, the more matches we win, the more clean sheets we keep, the more we pay our players. And the less well they do on that front, the less they will earn. So that's the basic premise of it. But in answer to one of the often asked questions in the last few days, where exactly is all of that money going in terms of wages? I think, and I'll give the club the benefit of the doubt, and I'll say it's because the bulk of that difference, which will exceed over 100 million, is going towards bonuses towards first team players.
No, that's a fair point, Mo, that what you've come on with. I think, from looking at the report and what you've just mentioned, I think looking at it now, where I see Liverpool Football Club, in 67th position right now, and top four it's in jeopardy, let's say. And with our football club, if we've hit sort of the heights of let's say our revenue of what we earned this year, and with our wage bill so high, we're not going to bring in the sort of revenue that we did from, let's say, Champions League football. We got to the final last year. We're not going to, let's just say we miss out on top four. And obviously this is going to have a massive impact on Liverpool's revenue. And if our wages are so high already, how are we going to sustain this sort of thing?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I mean, one of the things that we've seen when Liverpool were last out of the Champions League is that the wage bill was considerably less. So if you go back to 2016-17, when the club was not in any European competition, the wage bill was just over 200 million. And when they went into the Champions League for the first time in about 3 seasons, in 17-18, the wage bill increased by over 60 million. And the bulk of that would have been down to bonuses and other such payments related to the fact that the players were competing in the Champions League. Because that season, there weren't many contract renewals, and the key signing in the transfer window of summer 2017 was Mo Salah, and the other key one obviously was Oxlade-Chamberlain. So those were the only 2 wages, the bigger wages that were added to the wage bill, but there were also a couple of bigger ones that went out in the summer of 2017 as well. So that was about a 60 million jump going into the Champions League. Manchester United's wage bill is also a good example. When they dropped out of the Champions League a couple of years ago, their wage bill went down from 332 million down to 284, which was a difference of nearly 50 million. And our wage structure is more incentivized than theirs. In other words, ours is more leveraged on bonuses than theirs is. So if theirs went down by nearly 50 million, if we drop out of the Champions League, likely it is that our wage bill will reduce by a similar but probably a higher amount So yes, there will be a considerable drop in income, but there also should be a considerable drop in the wage bill too.
Okay. Look, Mo, I think I'll bring up a slide. I'll bring up a slide. It wasn't this one. It was this one here. Obviously, this is that gives us a bit more of a breakdown as to where the money was sort of spent. And I thought, it'd be good for you to actually walk us through this and give us a bit more of give us your understanding as to, in terms of commercially and stuff, where the money comes in, where it goes, sort of thing. And in terms of another thing, bar the wages, more, where else do we spend the money?
Yeah, very good question. So, right, what we're seeing here is a breakdown of the income.
Okay.
And if you then convert it into pounds, the top section is the commercial revenue, and that in pounds amounted to 233 million, and that was a club high in terms of commercial revenue. So it's never made as much commercial revenue as it did in 21-22. The next segment equates to 266 million. That's broadcast revenue, which is primarily Champions League money and Premier League money. And then the final section, 112 million euros, equates to about 95 million pounds. That's match day revenue. So that all told is 594 million. So that is revenue. That's all the income coming in.
Okay.
Now, where that went, 62% is noted on there, equates to the wage bills. So that's 368 million. But then I came out with some high-level analysis of, well, where else does the money go? So I estimated, for example, about 75 million went towards, and this is in 21-22, went towards transfer fee installment payments. So one of the things, for those that follow me on Twitter, I've talked about at length, is that transfer fees typically are paid in installments. So when you hear about so-and-so has been signed for 35, 40 million, it doesn't mean the club has gone out and handed over to the selling club 35 to 40 million. The standard procedure is that those transfer fees are paid in 3 or 4 installments, sometimes even 5 installments. So when you add all the installments for players that have been signed in the last couple of years, that, in my estimation, would have been in around 75 million. The club, in their accounts, who don't disclose a lot of information in their accounts, then have a couple of sections labeled cost of sales, admin expenses. So that can include for things like leasing of equipment, running Anfield, running Kirby, buying food, merchandise, drink, for match days, all these kind of ancillary costs and other overheads. Obviously, energy bills, which are going up and up all the time. And I estimated that to be about 105 million. And then I think there was another section that I also estimated as well. But all told, I estimated that when all was said and done, the club should have still had about 67 million pounds left. And that money was then used to go towards the initial instalment for the Darwin Núñez deal, the initial instalment for Ramsey, for Carvalho, and then most recently for Gakpo. And we all know that last summer we were also lining up a deal for Tchouaméni, but that didn't happen. So I think, my personal opinion is that some of that money, and not necessarily all of it, has been used towards a Gakpo deal. And I was hoping, and we still hope in the next week, that there's still a bit of money left in the back of the sofa or something to get a midfielder over the line before the transfer window slams shut.
Yeah. No, that's fair. But you know what? I think the $1 million question on a lot of us is, why is there no money for transfers? Especially more so if we look at our net spend over the last 4 or 5 years, it's really, really low compared to any other side, and it always feels as though that we've got no money to spend.
When we compare ourselves to our rivals, it definitely feels that way. But if you look at how much we spent in the last 12 months or so, we've spent a decent amount. Obviously, less than most of our rivals. But I think it's a very valid comment. It's a very valid question. How are we generating so much revenue, and yet we are still struggling to spend. James Pearce, who's been on here, talked after the Gakpo deal was done. He talked about how the club basically struggled to make that deal happen financially, and just about got it over the line. And obviously, he came in for some criticism about that. But if we don't get a midfielder in between now and the end of the transfer window next week, then maybe he was right. Maybe the club genuinely is struggling. So it does beg the question, where exactly is the money going? Now, we do know that some of the money has been going towards improvements to infrastructure. So infrastructure refers to Anfield, it refers to Kirkby and other such facilities. So about 2.5 years ago, the club finished paying 56 million towards the redevelopment of Kirkby as a new primary training facility for the club. Now, that was all paid for from club revenue. The owners didn't put any money towards that. So that, again, is something that, if the owners had paid for that, it would have been 56 million that the club could have used to buy maybe a couple of midfielders over the last couple of years. And Anfield, we know that the main stand was completed 5-6 years ago. However, we're still repaying it. The club is repaying that. Again, there was money that was borrowed by FSG, and then they lent that to the club, and it's the club that is having to repay that loan. So even though the loan is in the name of FSG, the club are having to repay it, not FSG. So again, that is money that could go towards signing players that instead is being used to pay off expansion of that stand. And now, obviously, the work is underway and well advanced for the Anfield Road End expansion. And that also is money that is being paid for by the club, not by the owners. So one argument is certainly that, well, if the owners spent money to cover the cost of the infrastructure improvements, then all of that money could instead have gone towards signing 3 or 4 midfielders over the last 3 or 4 years, even one every summer. And had we done that, I don't think we'd have the midfield crisis we have now. But maybe others might disagree.
And look, this is why it begs the question more like, you look at other clubs who don't make anywhere near as in terms of money than like we do, and then yet they go and spend a lot more than us. And then Liverpool fans will always ask the question as to, look, why not? Even like now, I'll be honest, I felt as though this season was a year where I felt the owners could have dipped into their own sort of pockets and helped us out. But I know Klopp has mentioned this is a non-negotiable way of us working in one of his interviews not so long ago. But look, personally, I think I would have liked the owners to look. I'm not saying every year go on pumping money, but I think the gaping gaps everybody could sort of see over the last couple of years, because we've not really spent money in the midfield, one midfielder in the last 4.5 years. I think we would have liked to have seen the owners put some, and said, because I felt as though Klopp's got enough backing there. His hit rate, let's say, is nearly 90% in all the transfers that he's sort of made. And, I would have liked the owners to have sort of helped him out in the summer, or if not, definitely this January.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this is the situation we're now in, though. We are trying to operate to what is referred to as a self-sustaining model. So for people who don't understand what that means, it means that the owners don't put any of their own money into the club. Anything that is done by the club in terms of paying wages, signing players, improving infrastructure, whatever it might be, has to be paid for out of the money that is generated by the club. And that's all well and good, except our rivals increasingly now are not operating on that basis. So that is the real fear for fans, is that we are going to be left behind. Manchester United are operating that model at the moment, but as we know, they're for sale. And as and when new owners come in at United, the likelihood is they will want to spend money. So if they get this Ratcliffe in, who's a big United fan, who's very, very wealthy, richer than Abramovich, well, at least richer than Abramovich was, he is likely to put his big hand down his pocket and say, right, I'm going to back my club. I'm not going to do what the Glazers did. So he will move to more of a Chelsea-type model. Chelsea is spending money like it's going out of fashion. Every 3 days, they're signing a new player. Manchester City, we all know about them. I don't need to repeat all of that stuff. Even Tottenham Hotspur, who traditionally have been even tighter in terms of their ownership than FSG, the owner took out a £150 million loan to sign players last summer. And he's putting that into the club because he knows that if he doesn't do that, their manager is going to walk out the door. He doesn't mess around. He will be gone. Arsenal is the best example. When FSG first came in, they said, and they went on record, John W. Henry went on record to express his admiration of how Kroenke's operating at Arsenal, because at that time they were the majority shareholder shortly after FSG took over. And they were operating this self-sustaining model with Arsene Wenger was there. But that led to their decline, and that led to them falling out of the Champions League. And then the Kroenkes made a conscious decision, look, if we try and carry on operating this way, we'll be stuck in mid-table oblivion forever.
Yeah.
What are we going to do? They changed their model, which resulted in them putting their own money into the club. And that is why they have outspent us. Their revenues, you know, we talked about revenue before.
Yeah.
Their revenue over the last 4 years has been over 600 million less than ours, which means each season we have generated on average about 150. In fact, it's 166 million a year more on average in the last 4 seasons. Wow. And yet, despite that, they've outspent us significantly in the transfer windows. Now, clearly, they had a lot more work to do in terms of improving their squad. If you go back to, say, 18-19, our squad was very good. I mean, it's clearly in need of some improvement, but we had a very strong, at least 17, 18 players. And then you could argue, okay, the kind of peripheral players were able to be upgraded. But at that point, we could have said, right, we don't need to go into this transfer approach now of signing 5-6 players every summer. We've got the basis of a great squad. The age profile is good. 3 signings, 4 at most every summer should do us. And then you just constantly work on that basis of just incremental changes. But instead, it was like, okay, no, let's just stick to what we have and let's just run them into the ground. And now we have an aged squad and we've got major surgery to carry out. And if we don't make Champions League, the questions are being asked, well, are we going to be even able to attract the likes of Jude Bellingham or others? And
no comment, I guess. But look, Mo, do you feel as though there's a chance that these guys will actually change their sort of it? Look, I know we are for sale, and you know I'm just going by. Look, if we don't get sold, let's say, do you think the owners will change their approach? You know, what's your opinion on that?
I don't think they'll put their own money into the club. I'll be honest. I think that they've stuck very rigidly to this for the last 12 and a half years. Even when Klopp was almost begging them, if you think back 2 years ago, when he was almost begging them, exactly 2 years ago, need a centre-back. They're all injured. They stumped up £1.5 million to sign Kabak. And then Ben Davies on loan, who never... Sorry, not on loan. He was actually a permanent signing. It was Kabak on loan. He never played for the club, did he, Davies? So 1.5 million with Klopp virtually begging. If that wasn't enough to get them to change how they operate, nothing will. So I genuinely don't think that they'll move to what the Kroenkes have done and start investing their own money. And part of that reason is because I don't think they've got lots of liquid assets that can be easily translated into cash to be handed over to the club. Most of their worth is in the assets that they own, which are Liverpool and the Boston Red Sox primarily. So if you strip all of that away, it's not like they've got hundreds of millions sat in the bank.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of reality of our ownership. They are not people with that kind of wealth in the way that others are. So if they're not going to change, how can it still be workable? I think the only way is to possibly go down like a Brentford or a Brighton type route, where we look for these unheralded gems that go under the radar.
No, man, we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be doing that. That's the simple truth. We should be sort of, shopping at the top sort of table.
I know. I couldn't agree more. But if FSG want to stay and they want to maintain a high wage bill, then the only other way is that we are able to splash out maybe every 4 years, to have a big spending spree, like as if it's Boxing Day and the sales are on, and you go out and spend as much as you can, and then that's it then for the year. But in football terms, it's like waiting another 4 years. So it's saying, okay, we splashed out, then we're going to wait now until we've saved up enough money to splash out again. And Liverpool Football Club shouldn't operate on that basis. But that's the reality. And the proof is in the pudding, because you have to look at net spend since post 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, 22, each summer, comfortably spent by other rival clubs. Now, part of that, to be fair to the owners, is not all down to them. It was perhaps the manager saying, look, I'm happy with what I've got. And that generally might be the case, that he didn't want to bring in 4, 5, 6 players. But at the same time, there has to be good squad management. There has to be this recognition that players won't be able to maintain elite levels forever. And the optimum model is that just as they're about to tail off, but they still retain reasonable value, is the time to move them on. So that way you generate money from sales as well. And that's another thing we've struggled with, that after we sold Coutinho pretty much 5 years ago now, for a massive sum, we've come nowhere near that amount. I mean, the biggest sale since then was, I think, Sadio Mane in the summer, and that was only about 30, 35 million. And if you look at clubs like Chelsea, Man City, they've been raking in loads of money from player sales. So again, that's another thing that we could be better at, if FSG were to stay, is to do a better job of getting premium value for the players that we have. Instead, what we seem to do is cling on to players right till the end of their contracts, and then they go on a free. So that does not tell you that it's the best run club around when you have so many players going on a free.
Look, obviously, Mo, I think we touched on the sale bit there, and in terms of FSG wanting to sell the club going forward. And obviously, we know that they are sort of looking for investment or want to sell the club as a whole. Obviously, I wanted to take your thoughts, what you think, how this will actually play out in regards to the actual sale, and in terms of how long do you believe it can sort of take, and how long it will take.
Yeah, I mean, clearly there's been loads and loads of speculation, hasn't there, since the story was broken by Ornstein of The Athletic about 2.5 months ago now. And, there's people that are saying, yeah, the sale's close. You go on Twitter, at any time now, and there's a Spaces going on with
a deal going on somewhere.
Lots of Arab brothers, talking passionately about, yeah, it's going to happen any day now, any day. And then on the flip side, you've got journalists saying, oh, no, there's no real interest. So fans are kind of stressing and thinking, who do I believe? What's going on? I just want to see this club competing at the top end, shopping in Harrods, not in Aldi. That's what Liverpool fans are asking for. Not in all cases. There are some that are saying, look, be careful what you wish for. That, we might bring in owners that might have a lot more wealth and might want to spend, but they might be like Todd Bowley at Chelsea, who's decided that, right, I'm the best person to be going out and recruiting players.
He just got on a mad one.
Oh my God, yeah. He's proper on.
Well, he's letting his name out put it out there. I think the whole world knows who Todd Bowley is right now, if nobody knew him 2 months ago.
Yeah, exactly. He'll be signing you and I up before we know it. So, it's mad. So you got to be careful about that sort of thing as well. That you don't want somebody to come in and then just go into some kind of ego football manager type mode. You want somebody that brings money but has a proper structure. So they say, right, okay, we're going to make the money available. We're going to sign the best players that the manager wants, but at the same time, we're going to be smart. We're going to look for those good value deals as well. And that, I think, is the perfect thing, that you can, when you want to sign that unicorn like a Jude Bellingham and you need to put down 150, the owners are going to put it down without even thinking about it. But at the same time, you've got other people working in the background to look for the next Andy Robertson, who's available for 8, 10, 12, 15 million pounds. That might be unheralded, but they turn into a world-class player. And you have that mix that, okay, when we need to shop big, we'll shop big. When we need to get that, bargain, we'll do that and merge it together and create that next great Liverpool side. And, if that comes together, if we get that new ownership in, then, that could all still be certainly feasible going into next summer.
I think Dylan Hughes got a question for you, Mo. He's asking, can you ask how will the revenue improve once the new Anfield Road stand is built? And another question that just on the back of that, Mo, I want to ask is, these guys obviously at FSG have built 2 stands now. Do you believe another, increasing the capacity further is another way of increasing revenue, and you believe they'll actually carry that out?
Okay, so in terms of revenue, the increase once the Anfield Road end opens up, which should be start of next season, should result in annual increased revenue of about 10 to 12 million pound. So that's really good, because what it means, we talked about 95 million for last season. It means that Anfield will be generating over 100 million pound in match day income, which is something that very few clubs in world football can achieve and do achieve. So that is really good, and hats off. I did put out a Twitter thread having a bit of a go at FSG about 3 weeks ago, because I said they did it. I said they did it because they could have actually expanded that stand about 4 years ago. And I know I know that because I was actually dealing with some of the people who were working on the main stand, and they said, look, we've got a design now, a revised, up-to-date design with corporate hospitality. And these were people that were working on the main stand construction job. And they said, we've got the design, and we can start on that. Obviously, going through planning applications, getting planning permission, etc., as soon as the main stand is done. But the club said, no, let's just see if there's enough interest in corporate hospitality in the main stand first. And if there's enough interest, then we'll perhaps make a decision later on down the line.
It always feels like it's reactive more than proactive with everything that Liverpool sort of do. Stevie
Wonder could have told him that stand would be perfectly fine. It would be sold out 10 times over. So, my God, that's a kind of frustration, is that sometimes they're a bit too risk averse, a bit too prudent. And sometimes you have to be a bit bolder in business and think, no, this is Liverpool Football Club. It's a worldwide institution. We can expand the capacity to 90,000 and it will sell out. Exactly. But yeah, in answer to the second part of that question, so is it possible for a phase 3 of the Anfield redevelopment? The short answer is yes. The long answer is it'd be extremely complex and difficult. So without going into the boring detail, if there's only 2 stands that can be expanded, the Kop and the Sekeni Dalglish stand. So let's start with the Sekeni Dalglish stand, also known as a centenary. So that stand, as we know, has residential properties and roads right behind it. And as we know from the main stand, it took years and years and years to buy out all of the properties and go through legal processes and all sorts to get that done. So if Liverpool wanted to expand that stand, the club would have to go through the exact same process, which could take years and years. The other stand, the Kop, the famous Kop, has a road running behind it, Wharton Brick Road. And very close to one corner of it is the back of the megastore, the club shop. Yeah. And then just on the other side of the road, you've got, I think, a church. You've got the Albert Pub and 1 or 2 other shops and things. So again, it's possible, but it wouldn't come without its difficulties and complexities. And also, you've got to think about the transport limitations as well. It's a residential area. It's not like where Old Trafford is in the outskirts of Manchester on like an industrial estate, where it's a bit easy in terms of the road network. So it is possible. I think unlikely though. So I think that if new owners come in, they might look to see if there's little bits of capacity to add seating here or there. But in terms of carrying out a wholesale expansion of either of those two stands would involve a huge amount of work and would take years to get done.
That's a fair comment. Blue Chips in the building, Avi's in the house. He's got, what's he saying? Was there talk of the Anfield Road end to be renamed by a sponsor more? One of the stands I'm sure we were looking at it to be one of the stands to be looking at for it to be sponsored.
Yeah. So it was actually the main stand. So the club went on record. Well, FSG went on record to say that they were seeking sponsors for the naming rights for the main stand, and that was about 9-10 years ago that they talked about that. 10 years on, no sponsor. So they clearly failed to get any interest in that, and it is difficult. I mean, Tottenham Hotspur are trying to get naming rights deal for their whole stadium, and they still haven't achieved it about 3-4 years after they finished building that. So it's difficult to get naming rights for a stadium, even more difficult to get a whole stand sponsored.
More, there's the question that actually I'll go to Kev Williams. Have FSG underestimated how big globally the club is? And that's a fair point.
I personally think, and again, there'll be certain fans who will disagree, I think there is a mismatch between the ambitions of large sections of our fan base and the ambitions of the ownership. And there'll be some fans who will be raging at what I just said. They'll say, how could you say that? FSG are massively ambitious. I think they have ambition. I don't think it's something that is manifesting itself in the kind of actions that you see of other ownerships. So just as an example, other clubs and their owners, when they really, really want a player, sometimes you have to pay well over the odds to just get it done. And in our entire history under FSG, I can only think of one time where we've been willing to go well over the odds to get the deal done, and that was Virgil van Dijk. And that was it. I think all the other deals, we've tried to make sure we get the deal within what we're willing to pay. And I think there have been plenty of times when even Klopp had deals over the line. He might have had secret meetings in Blackpool, but then when it came down to getting the business done, FSG weren't willing to stretch that little bit further to get it over the line. So I think that is why it's an understandable frustration. But at the same time, the other argument is, well, look, FSG have delivered Klopp, they've delivered Edwards, they've delivered the Premier League, they've delivered the Champions League, main stand expansion, Anfield Road end expansion, Kirby expansion. So it's not as if they've done nothing in their time at the club either. So there has to be a bit of balance too.
Look, I think more. I want an honest opinion in regards to the next question. And just say the FSG, don't sell our football club. What do you think that'll mean for Liverpool going forward? Let's say over the next couple of years. And I want an honest opinion on this more.
Right, I'll be totally honest. For me, it'd be worrying, and the reason why is because, like I said earlier, I don't think they're going to change their model. I think they will stick rigidly to it. And the frustrating thing in a way is that there's almost an acknowledgement that the model's no longer fit for purpose. And the reason there's an acknowledgement is because they've gone on record to say we are seeking investment. Why are they seeking investment? Now, I mean, you'd like to think they're seeking investment because they want to put money back into the club. I think it's because they feel they've taken the club as far as they can.
Yeah.
And so if that's how they feel, the better they move on. Sorry, the sooner they move on, the better. That's not to say that you can just expect them to sell the club at a cut price deal. But even at a cut price deal, they'll still make a massive, massive profit. 300 million they got the club in, bought the club for back in 2010.
Exactly.
They'll make that multiple times over. So, even if it's 2.5 to 3 billion, and they might be hoping for 4, that's still a massive return. And they can buy a lovely island in the Pacific and then just chill out for the rest of their days and forget about Liverpool, forget about football. Just relax, take it easy.
The question, Morgan, do Liverpool sponsors have clauses around UCL, Champions League participation? Would missing out on top 4 affect sponsorship revenue?
So that is not something that is publicly known about any of the deals. So the primary ones are obviously the front shirt sponsor, who are Standard Chartered, the night deal, the sleeve sponsor, which is Expedia, and the training kit, which is AXA. So there's nothing publicly known about whether there's clauses in those deals about whether if the club were to fall away from the Champions League, whether those revenue streams would reduce. In the same way that we know, for example, and it is on record, if Manchester United finish outside of the top 4
2 years in a row,
2 years in a row, their Adidas money will go down by 30%, which is £22.5 million. So I'm hoping that that's not the case with any of the Liverpool sponsorships, but at the same time, it can't be ruled out. It is a possibility.
And another thing I think what I want to ask myself is in regards to FSG, and if they do sell up and let's say move on, again, honest opinion, Mo, what's your overall impressions of their time here, and what do you think of them?
I've got mixed views about them. I mean, there have been times long ago when I wanted them gone. I'm thinking back to around 2015. At that time, they'd been at the club for close to 5 years. This is when, at the tail end of Brendan, I mean, it's like a nightmare. But remember that 6-1 at Stoke, bloody hell. Yeah. And we went into the summer. We thought, right, Brendan's days must be done now, and they kept him on. And I thought, what are they doing? What on earth are they thinking? And I was thinking, right, there's just no hope with these people. They just need to go. But luckily, they did bring in Klopp. They then started recruiting smarter. They brought in Edwards into a more senior role, and then eventually sporting director. And then we had this fantastic run of recruitment. And at the same time, they finished off the main stand, which was a magnificent structure. They then eventually, even though I had a bit of a go at them about this, they eventually got on to expanding Annie Road End. And when that is done, it will look great as well. They also have sorted out, certain things behind the scenes, which were not so great to begin with. They've also sorted out a fantastic training facility, albeit they only spent about half the money on that as Leicester City did on their Seagrave training facility, which was opened about 18 months ago, which is an impressive facility. So as well as they've done with AXA, again, they did go slightly on the cheaper side. They could have rolled out a bit. It's like they haven't got an indoor training full-size pitch. So a lot of these other clubs that we are competing against...
Oh, well, I wasn't aware of that,
Yeah, so if you go to Kirby, there's no full-size indoor pitch like you see at a lot of the other rivals' training grounds. And that wasn't delivered as a cost-cutting measure, which again was because of the owners. So that's why I always have mixed opinions about them, in that I think that whilst they've done certain things extremely well, there's always this uncle about them. They like to be a little bit cheap and like to cut corners here and there. And sometimes you just want them to kind of be a bit bold and a bit adventurous. And that's why I'm hoping that if we do see a change of ownership, a lot of these discussions that we have won't be needed. Part of the thing is, it's like I say this as somebody that is interested in finance. I work in finance. Is that it's a frustration in a way that Liverpool fans shouldn't be taking this much interest in the finances of the club. They should just be happy that, okay, we've got owners that if the manager wants a deal to be done, they will back him. And they're not thinking about, okay, about amortization and about the wage bill and about the turnover and almost becoming amateur accountants. That's not what we as football fans should be doing. We should be focused more on what goes on the pitch and what goes on off of it. So, and it's not me just trying to discredit my profession or what I do, but at the same time, football fans should be less worried about the financial side of things.
And that's a fair point there. Mo, I've got a question. A friend of mine called Shuma, he sent me a message and he really wanted me to get an answer to this. I'll read it out. Apart from the funding of the new stand, is there any major debt servicing that prohibits us from spending?
No, I'm trying to think. So there's, as per the last accounts, which were for 2021, and there's about 127 million of a revolving credit facility, some of which was retained to cover any cash flow issues relating to COVID. But the bulk of it was retained to cover the costs of the expansion of the Anfield Road end, which was £80 million, as per the last or latest estimates. And we are still paying off the loan for the main stand. So even though it's the loan that FSG took out with the funder, in terms of paying it off, they passed that on to the club. So we've, as per the last accounts for 2021, is about £198 million, I think, off the top of my head. So as per the accounts that are to be released in a few weeks, that should be down to about 160, 170 million. But that should be pretty much all in relation to infrastructure works and nothing else I can think of.
That's a fair point. I think somebody put up a question for wondering. I think it's just gone now. I should have read that before. Let me find it. Where's it gone? I don't know where it's gone now. Too many messages have come after that. Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah. Is there any information the club are taking money out of the club through dividends?
Okay, so they're definitely not taking money out through dividends. But the other question that is often asked is, well, are they able to take money out in other ways where it's not explicit in the accounts? The short answer is, if they really wanted to, yes, they can. But that's not me saying that they are. I'm just saying that it is possible. In the same way that owners of a private business who might not want to take money out through dividends can still come up with creative ways to extract money from a club or the company that they own. But again, just to be clear, that's not me saying FSG are taking money out.
And then I don't know if you can answer this. Is this Dives wants to know? I want to know, when the club owner wants to sell a minor stake, how are they presenting it as a lucrative deal? Normally, what is the procedure when there is change in ownership involved?
Okay, so in terms of how would they make it an attractive proposition, it's a difficult one, in my view, because you're saying to potential investors, right, come and buy 10% or 20% of this asset. We'll use that money for these prescribed purposes. So that can be in the agreement. But then you don't ultimately get a say because we are the majority shareholder. So I don't see that being too appealing to potential investors. Saying that, though, Manchester City on 2 occasions have sold 10% of their club or their City Football Group to outside investors. The first time it was to a Chinese group, 10%, and that was about 5 years ago. And the second time was about 2 or 3 years ago from memory. That might have been to an American group. So 10% the first time, 10% the second time. So those people didn't take any kind of ownership or have a say in decision making of the club. But I think they invested into to City because they thought it would be an appreciating asset. So that potentially is the only real sell here, is to say to potential investors, right, we only want to sell 10 or 20%. However, if you invest that now, your investment will appreciate over the next 5 years, 10 years, because we think that the rights for Premier League, for Champions League, or both, will increase over time. And we think there's considerable upside in terms of optimizing commercial revenue. So all told, whilst it might be worth 3-4 billion now, 5-10 years down the line, we think it'll be worth 8 billion or 10 billion. But I still think if you're an investor, buying a majority stake and taking control of the club, even if FSG are there as a minority stakeholder, is almost likely to be the more appealing of the options.
Yeah, I would have thought so myself. I think minority stake, I don't really see somebody plowing in 500 million to go and spend money when there's not much you're going to know in terms of decision making or anything like that. You're not part of it, and they still call the shots, let's say. But honestly, Mo, I think we'll have this one as the last question. I know I said I'll have you for an hour, so we'll go with this one as the last one. Does Mo have a preference on any new owner? Oh, here we go.
$1 million question. Right. I ultimately want owners who will invest their own money into the Liverpool Football Club. And even if we want to get a really big deal over the line, say if it's Jude Bellingham and we require some owner investment, that those owners won't blink twice to get it done. But I want them to come in without ego to say, look, we are not football people. We'll appoint the best people into the sporting director role, into the role that's being vacated by Dr. Ian Graham, and these types of positions, and having that proper structure in place there. Also appointing the best people on the commercial side, because as well as we do on the commercial front, I think we can still take it that next level up. We are a bigger football club than Bayern Munich, and yet Bayern Munich commercial revenue is about 70 million more than ours. So I want to be hitting those heights. I want us to be doing the best in everything. And those are the types of owners that I want at Liverpool Football Club. And if we get those types of owners, plus a strong manager and kind of an energized, revitalized squad with those inspired appointments, then this low period will be long forgotten about. And a year or two down the line, we'll be looking at winning another Premier League and looking at competing for the Champions League and getting to yet another final. So that's my ambition. I'm sure that's the ambition of many of our fans.
Yeah,
in terms of where they're from, I don't care. They could be from Mars, as far as I'm concerned.
I'm the same, mate. I'm the same. Honestly, I don't really care where they're from, as long as they give Klopp the money that he deserves for us to become contenders of every single trophy every single year. Because we're Liverpool Football Club, like you mentioned, we are one of the biggest, and we want to see ourselves there. I think Blue Chip was bloody messaging me saying, I want to ask you some sort of wrestling sort of question, man. And he's ready. Where are you? Where's he gone? Let me see if he actually put it up, man. And you know what, Mo, I'll be honest, this is my first time actually hosting a show, mate. So with these comments, mate, I'm not that great.
You'll come in practice.
Fun, man. Oh, here's a go. Where's he gone? Sean or Brett, be careful with your answer. It could affect our friendship.
Sean or Brett. I'll have to go Brett. Hitman.
Yeah, the Hitman. There you go, Blue Chip. You got your answer, mate. But honestly, Mo, it's been a pleasure to have you on, man. Honestly, especially for people like me who don't have a clue in regards to finance, for you to break it down for us. And, for us to get a bit more of an understanding as to where the money actually goes, because that was the $1 million question. We see all this money, we're thinking, where the hell's it all sort of gone? But thanks for, you really actually broken it down. And you did mention, you're doing a proper comprehensive report, hopefully, over the coming weeks, which will hopefully break it down even further. When you do that, make sure you give us a call. You're coming on the show to do that same, to break it down even further, let's say. But honestly, from me and the guys at our channel, man, it's been a pleasure to have you on. And yeah, we'll definitely, like I said, we'll be in contact to bring you on again. And everybody that's in the comments or as watchers, do like, do share, and do subscribe to the channel. We started this channel only 5 months ago, and we're trying to grow as fast as we can. So we look forward to you guys, and we've got a show on Thursday coming up as well. The details of that will be posted on Twitter over the coming weeks. Mo's got his handle on the front of your screen as well, so give Mo a follow on Twitter as well, guys. And thank you very much to everybody, and we will see you soon.